Lev Vygotsky was born on November 5th in 1986 in Orsha, Russia, which is now Belarus. He died at the young age of 37 from tuberculosis, which ran in his family. He was the second oldest of 8 children. His father was a banker and his mother was an educated homemaker. He was taught by a private tutor because the life of a Jew in Russia was limited in terms of places to live, study, and tutor. Vygotsky began studying to be a teacher, but was prevented from continuing his education because he was Jewish. So he then went to a school to study medicine, finally transferred to law, and graduated from Moscow University with a degree in law in 1917, the same year the Russian Revolution began. In 1924, Vygotsky took part in an all-Russian psychoneurological congress. He then became a research fellow at the Psychological Institute in Moscow. He married Rosa Smekova and began his career as a staff scientist. And by the end of 1925, he completed his dissertation of The Psychology of Art and a book called Pediological Psychology. In 1926, Vygotsky was hospitalized for tuberculosis and miraculously survived, but was without a job for the rest of the year. From 1927 to 1930, he began investigating the development of cognitive functions, such as memory, selective attention, and language comprehension. Vygotsky created a group of collaborators, including Luria Sakharov, Varshava, Leontiev, and Zankov. In the 1930s, Vygotsky was caught in a crisis throughout his personal and theoretical life due to massive self-criticism and an attempt to revise his theories. In 1932 to 1934, he tried to establish a theory of consciousness, but he died of tuberculosis and his work was left in an unfinished form. These are the last words Vygotsky left for the world. This is the final thing I have done in psychology, and I will, like Moses, die at the summit, having glimpsed the promised land but without setting foot on it. Farewell, dear creations, the rest is silence.
Is the theory that social interaction plays a fundamental role in the development of cognition. Vygotsky states, every function in the child's cultural development appears twice. First, on the social level, and later on the individual level. First between people, and then inside the child. This applies equally to voluntary attention, to logical memory, and to the formation of concepts. All the higher functions originate as actual relationships between individuals. The social development theory includes 3 major concepts. First, the role of social interaction in cognitive development. This concept states that the social development theory mainly asserts that social interaction has a vital role in the cognitive development process. With this concept, Vygotsky's theory opposes that of Piaget's cognitive development theory because Piaget explains that a person undergoes development first before he achieves learning, whereas Vygotsky argues that social learning comes first before development. Through the social development theory, Vygotsky states that the cultural development of a child is firstly on the social level called interpsychological and secondly on the individual or personal level called intrapsychological. The second concept is called the more knowledgeable other. This concept states that the more knowledgeable other is any person who has a higher level of ability or understanding than the learner in terms of the task, process, or concept at hand. Normally, when we think of a more knowledgeable other, we refer to an other adult, a teacher, or an expert. For example, a child learns multiplication of numbers because his tutor teaches him well. The traditional, more knowledgeable is an older person. However, the more knowledgeable other could also refer to our friends, younger people, and even electronic devices like computers and cell phones. For example, a mother might learn how to ice skate because her daughter taught her the skill. The third and final concept is the zone of proximal development. The zone of proximal development is the distance between what is known and what is unknown by the learner. It is the difference between the ability of a learner to perform a specific task under the guidance of his more knowledgeable other and the learner's ability to do that task independently. Basically, the theory explains that learning occurs in the zone of proximal development.
Vygotsky's sociocultural theory of cognitive development is centered on the ideas that social interaction and imaginative play are large contributors to the process of cognitive development. He believed that the most important learning a child could experience was through social interactions. His cognitive development theory includes the use of scaffolding, which is a process where teachers model or demonstrate how to solve a problem, then take a step back and let the students do it independently, but offer support as needed. An example of this would be a high school teacher in lab science might provide her students with a detailed guide on how to carry out experiments, then give them brief outlines of how they would structure the experiments, and finally ask them to set up the experiments on their own. In addition to his cognitive development theory, Vygotsky also believed that language was the most important tool that humans could utilize. With language development, Vygotsky stated that there are three forms of language. The first is social speech. This is the external communication that people use to talk with other people, and this form was typical in children starting at age 2. The second is called private speech, which is the internal communication that a person directs to themselves, and this form is typical in children starting at age 3. Lastly is silent inner speech. This is what happens when private speech diminishes in its audibility until it becomes a self-regulating function, and this form is typical in children starting at age 7. Vygotsky's focus on language being part of cognitive development was based on the idea that at the beginning of a child's life, language and thought begin as separate systems, and that the two systems would merge in the child around the age of 3.
Strengths and weaknesses. A strength is that Vygotsky's theory shows educators that a student's environment has an effect on the student's learning ability. This does not include direct instruction, but should include the student facilitating his or her learning through peer interaction and one's environment. Vygotsky's theory acknowledges differences between individuals within the same culture and between people with different cultures. Possible weaknesses to Vygotsky's theory are assuming that it is relevant to all cultures. In some instances, observation and practice may be more effective ways of learning certain skills. The approach might also be seen as rather school-centered in its emphasis on eventually learning specific concepts.
Classroom application. The traditional model of the teacher transferring information to her students is still believed in many educational institutions. However, Vygotsky's social development theory has changed this tradition by explaining that the students must have an active role in learning for the process to occur faster and more efficiently. A contemporary educational application of Vygotsky's theories is reciprocal teaching, which is used to improve students' ability to learn from text. In this method, teachers and students collaborate in learning and practicing 4 key skills: summarizing, questioning, clarifying, and predicting. The teacher's role in this process is reduced slowly over time. Vygotsky's theories also feed into the current interest in collaborative learning, suggesting that group members should have different levels of ability so more advanced peers can help less advanced ones. Teachers can use information about both levels of Vygotsky's zone of proximal development in organizing classroom activities in the following ways. Instruction can be planned to provide practice in the zone of proximal development for individual children or for groups of children. For example, hints and prompts that help children during the assessment could form the basis of instructional activities. Cooperative learning activities can be planned with groups of children at different levels who can help each other learn. Lastly, scaffolding can be used where the adult does not simplify the task, but the role of the learner is simplified through the graduated intervention of the teacher.